Hi, everyone. Welcome to Workplace Training at Scale, Language Learning in the Global Organization. My name is Katie Nielsen, and I'm Voxy's Chief Education Officer. To give you a little bit of information about me, I spent most of my career working as a teacher or a scientist, figuring out the best way to use technology to teach languages. And what I want to talk about today is how you can leverage technology to make language training in your workplace more efficient and effective. A little bit about Voxy. We have over 4 million learners in 150 and counting countries around the world. We can help offer English language training at scale because we use a combination of personalized learning and technology to help create the most effective learning environment possible to get your employees learning the English they need to do their jobs as quickly and efficiently as possible. I'm going to talk a little bit about the science behind why what we're doing works. So first of all, learning English is learning a new skill, not studying a traditional content area. And that means that any language learning program needs to approach it this way. We have to begin by teaching our learners, your employees, how to do whatever it is they need to be able to do for their jobs in English, which is entirely different from starting with something like A, B, C, and teaching everyone apple and banana and book and airplane, and then hoping they'll be able to do their jobs. 30 years of research have shown that there are 4 things we need to have for second language acquisition. This means that any workplace language learning program needs to make sure that all employees have access to these 4 requirements. They need input, which means they need to have examples of English written and examples of English to listen to. They need output, which means they need to be able to practice using English themselves, both in speech and in writing. They need opportunities to interact, so they need to be able to talk to other people or write to them, and they need feedback on how they're progressing. And if you have all of these 4 elements, then your workplace language learning program will be set up for success. And we know this because the science of second language learning has changed over time. Back in the 1600s, people thought that you needed to teach languages using translation, and we know that that's not true. In fact, the most appropriate approach for a workplace language learning program is what's called task-based language teaching. This means that we start at the beginning and figure out what job tasks your employees need to be able to complete in English, and then teach them how to do those tasks. We also know that in order to be effective, a language learning program needs to be efficient. And a blended approach is the right way to do that. We use software for what technology can do best, so people can do what humans do best. This helps us cut down the time it takes for your employees to learn a language and gets them using it on the job as quickly as possible. We use real-world materials. This is super important to our approach and our effectiveness. Instead of starting with lessons that are written by textbook authors, we start with the real materials that your employees and our language learners need to use in English. We start with manuals, we start with employee handbooks, we start with documents explaining how to do their jobs, with video recordings of people doing their jobs. This helps them learn the real English they need to succeed, rather than memorizing lists of vocabulary words before they actually start using English. So how do we do all of that? Well, there are 5 key elements. We start with personalized courses. Because learning a language is learning a skill, it's going to be different for everyone. Like, here's an example. Here's another skill. If I wanted to teach an individual person how to ride a bike, it would make no sense to start with a classroom full of learners and teach them about how to balance themselves, where to put their feet, how to hold the handlebars, using a textbook. All of the time that we spent in the classroom teaching everyone the same thing would be lost as soon as all of the people went outside and actually got on bikes. And that's why all of our courses are personalized, because every learner needs to learn a different thing. We use real-world content. We can't stress this enough, but we know from 50 years of research on how to teach languages that if you start with the real English people need to do their jobs or meet their goals, they will learn faster, they will see the relevance right away to their own context, and they won't learn English they don't need. We also include live instruction, and I'll explain how this works a little bit later in the presentation, but it's very important to understand that because English is fundamentally a tool that people need to communicate, they have to be able to talk to other people or write to other people in order to be able to acquire it. You can't do it all by yourself. Assessment is important for two reasons. One, it explains to learners what they're learning and where they need help. And it also helps managers and employers understand who's succeeding and who maybe needs a different approach. It also helps you measure your success. Anytime you want to teach an entire workforce a complicated skill, you need to make sure that it's working. And so any language learning program needs to have assessment and metrics built into it, because you want to be able to report them out. At the end of the day, you need to be able to show that all of the resources you're investing in your English learning program are working. So you want to be able to document success. So I talked about personalization. How does this work? Well, it starts at the very beginning. You need to conduct a needs analysis. We have to answer a few key questions. Because learning English could take a lifetime. You don't have a lifetime. You want to be able to give your employees the English they need to do their jobs and meet their goals. So you need to figure out who needs to learn English, why are they learning it, what materials do they need to read, and what tasks do they need to complete. Answering these 4 questions not only helps you set up an effective workplace program by identifying who needs to learn English and what they should learn, but it also helps you measure success. Many programs will say they teach business English, and they offer a generic approach to English for the workplace. What's important is finding out the specific tasks that your learners need to complete and in what context. So taking part in interviews is very different from writing and reading resumes and cover letters, or understanding what's happening in the office, or interacting with customers. We need to go through and find out what the goals are of your employees and what your goals are to make sure we can deliver courses that are focused on those specific tasks. Because the right thing is different for everyone. We know that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work, which is why we personalize instruction at multiple levels. We start with only teaching people the English they need to do their jobs, and then we adapt instruction based on how learners are performing. Those who need more work with listening get more listening practice. Those who need more work with writing get more writing practice. And by teaching people exactly what they need to know, we can teach them much faster. We also make sure that our courses are aligned to employees' needs and jobs. I've talked a lot about task-based language teaching and why what we offer is aligned to the tasks learners need to complete. But it's also important to make sure the content ties to their specific jobs. That way they get information about how to do their jobs and they get English training at the same time. So we're talking about a technology-mediated language training product, which is a mouthful. And many people think that means it doesn't include live instruction, and that's absolutely not the case. All of our courses include live instruction. It's just taught virtually. And in fact, that's actually a benefit. Some people think that if it's not done in the classroom, it's not as good. And we know that's not true. For one, your employees are far less likely to cancel their classes when they can take them from the comfort of their own computers than when they need to leave your work site or go to a specific place to take a lesson. And we also know that employees can record their live classes and go back and review them, adding much more to the learning experience than you can find in a face-to-face environment. Our live instruction resolves issues of space and time. Learners can take classes anytime, anywhere from their phones or computers. And we offer real experiences. Learners work on actual work emails with their instructors. They read correspondence they've received and don't quite understand. They collaborate with other learners on shared documents. Using technology to mediate live instruction makes it even more real. And it works. Here's some data from the last 9 months looking at what happens with Voxy learners who take part in our live classes. Average improvement goes up 30% when learners spend 10 hours in group classes with other language learners from around the world. And learners who get our private one-on-one instruction improve 50% more. That's a nice segue into measuring outcomes. I said at the beginning that it's incredibly important to make sure that your English learning program is designed to report metrics for success. And what should those be? Based on a lot of research, we've determined that the 4 most critical ways to determine whether or not your language learning program works is to look at time on task. So how much time are people spending working on the program? Whether or not they've mastered the language and content. Can they read things in English? Can they read what you want in English? Is their overall English proficiency improving? We want to make sure that you're happy, that your employees are happy, and that the people with whom they interact are happy. And we also want to make sure that they can do their jobs. If you measure success in these 4 ways, you can be sure that your language learning program is working. So here are some examples. We looked at about 5,000 Voxy learners over the past 8 months. 98% of our 0 beginners, those are learners who start out without knowing anything. If you're familiar with the Common European Framework of Reference, there are learners who are pre-A1. 98% of those learners became A1 learners after an average of 13 hours. And the high beginners did something very similar. 97% of them improved from A1 to A2 after an average of 14 hours. When you look at intermediate and advanced learners, you see progress is slightly slower, which makes sense. It's very easy and fast to make progress at the beginning of learning a language, and as you progress, it takes more time. 35% of our intermediate and advanced learners improved a level after an average of 27 hours, and 53% improved their proficiency, not quite enough to go up a level, after 17 hours of usage. We track the data from every single one of our learners to make sure that the platform is working and to make sure we can make changes to it if it isn't. As far as mastering the course content, 80% of our learners pass the test they take at the end of the units, whether they are working on a course designed for the food service industry, the hospitality industry, entrepreneurship. Our learners pass their tests. This was looking at 42,000 different tests. And our clients are happy. Here's an example of one of our clients, Campari in Brazil, who purchased Voxy to help improve the ability of its learners to communicate using English, because it's a global company that has to communicate in English around the world. And after 8 months, 57% had reached low intermediate. Our learners also give us positive feedback. Hotel receptionists, salespeople, people who need to attend business meetings, because our platform is designed to meet the needs of learners in workplaces around the world with different goals, they're all able to give us clear information about what they're able to do in English after they use the platform. And they send it to us too, from letters from people's bosses, from report cards in graduate school, from acceptance letters, from journals. Somebody sent us a wedding invitation. We get screenshots from learners who are able to have conversation on WhatsApp in English. We make sure that the platform is designed to meet people's real world needs, and then they send us examples of how that's worked. And that's something that every workplace language learning program should have. So to recap, in order to design an effective and scalable program for the workplace, you need to understand the science behind language learning works. You also need to understand that technology can both add value and solve a problem, making the solution scalable and making outcomes measurable. You want to make sure that instruction is based on learners' needs, and so you need a needs analysis to define an overall strategy, both for your workplace and for each learner. You need to make sure that the technology you're using is able to report outcomes. That way, instruction is optimized so that everyone can pay attention, because we need to teach the right thing. Moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach makes learning faster. So that's what I have as far as my presentation today, but I saved some time for questions. Let's see if we have any. So it looks like there's a question about how we can make sure that the content that each learner needs is delivered to the right learner at the right time, which is a great question. We've actually invested many resources in finding authentic examples of industry-specific English content, analyzing them, adding them to our platform, and tagging them for the proficiency level for which they're most appropriate, and making sure that learners who are in the right industries get those materials. We can also take industry-specific material from any workplace and very quickly adapt it and turn it into lessons. We actually have 4 patents on the tool that we built to help us process and adapt content. So creating very specific courses for individual workplaces is something that we do frequently for our clients and can easily deploy. So here's another question, which is, how is the achievement measured with end-of-unit tests? Yes, that's exactly right. We measure achievement by learners' performance on the tests they take at the end of every unit they complete in their Voxy courses, and we measure proficiency using our global proficiency assessments. So here's another question, which is, why doesn't translation work well for language education? And that's a great question, and most people who don't understand how language learning works immediately think that translation needs to be part of any solution. Because when they try to think about how they would use another language, the first thing they do is think about what they want to say in English or their first language and start to translate it. But what we know is that translation is actually a sophisticated skill that you acquire after you learn another language. And the best way to learn a language is to practice listening to it and reading it, even if you don't know all the words, because the goal is to be able to use a language as a tool without translation. Is there any approach related with not exactly young workers? Okay, so some people think that technology-mediated approaches like this one are best for young people because they're always on their phones and on their computers. We've built a tool that has been widely used by learners from all ages, from 13 to 85, probably older. I just remember a specific 85-year-old. And the platform itself is very streamlined and simple to use, and we offer support for learners and for customers, for people who are having technical difficulties. So we find that after a few times of using the platform, it becomes second nature for people to use it. And we've used Voxy successfully in areas around the world with very low technical literacy, where people don't have a lot of experience learning on computers or phones, to great success. Our customer success team and our learner support team are here to help people with those questions. So this is a great question. What time does an individual commit to complete a course or unit of learning? And the answer no one's going to like, because it depends. But it really does depend on how much time learners have and what they need to learn. So if they start out as zero beginners and they need to make progress very quickly, we see people who can improve a level after 6 weeks, working 3 or 4 hours a week. When you have someone who's an intermediate, it takes a little bit more time. But we see great success with learners in as little as 1 to 2 hours of time on task per week. Okay, what factors help ensure user engagement? Another great question. So our learners tend to be pretty engaged, far more engaged than with other self-study products, because they're getting content that is directly relevant to their interests and their goals. On top of that, we have a learner engagement program to make sure we send learners text messages and emails and let them sign up to receive phone calls to make sure that they are getting their questions answered and that we are encouraging them to continue using the platform. We also work closely with HR managers and employer managers in individual workplaces to make sure that everybody is being held accountable for their English training. So some workplaces actually will pay for access to the platform for all of their employees, and as long as they use it, they're able to get that as a benefit. And if they don't use it, then they have to reimburse the company. That sometimes helps. In general, people have trouble doing things that are hard and take a lot of time if they don't think they're important. So when language instruction is prioritized by an employer, people tend to be more engaged. How do we offer personalization in group live instruction? All of our group live instruction is organized around a common topic for learners at the right proficiency level. And then we have a comprehensive training program so that our teachers are able to adapt each class to the needs of the students in real time. We make sure that all students get a chance to participate in either speaking or writing, depending upon how the class is organized, and that teachers are devoting time individually to each student in the class, making sure that their questions are being answered and they're getting feedback on their performance. So why don't users see a list of activities on the homepage? That's a very specific product question. And what happens on the homepage is we want learners to right away go into their courses. And then as they're working, the activities adapt in real time. Because we use an adaptive approach to instruction, we don't know which activities learners are going to get until they start performing. And then we give them the activities that make the most sense. However, if learners actually want to go in and choose specific topics and specific activities, they can do that from our Real Media page. And if anyone has any questions about how this works, feel free to get in touch with us and we can set up a personalized demo to make sure that the platform works for your needs and your institutional needs.